I feel like my roommates are watching Gilmore Girls right now. Possibly. I don't know. Hi guys! Today's video is going to be an updated video all about concert photography and kind of how I got into it and some general tips if you want to get into doing that, because it's something that I get asked on a weekly basis and I feel like I've been doing it long enough to where I have like an expertise, you know? While I will link to the video that I posted a couple years ago about concert photography, I'll give you an abridged version of how I got into it. I started shooting shows after I started writing for a music blog that I found on Craigslist. It literally said music site needs writers, and I was like, well, I could do that, so I did that, and then I started realizing that I could take my camera into shows, and then I shot my first show just over 5 years ago, The Lonely Forest with Telekinesis and the Globes at the Showbox. And ever since then, I have been shooting concerts on a weekly basis, and it's one of my favorite things in the whole wide world. Since then, I've written for 3 different music blogs, the first being Pop Reckoning, which has now gone under. I've been writing for Backbeat Seattle for several years now, and then I just started contributing to Seattle Music Insider, another one around here, clearly. And I've met a lot of really great friends through it, and I've met a lot of really great people, both photographers, writers, and musicians, and it's basically changed my life in every single way. But the main reason I'm making this video is for those of you who might want to get into it yourself. There's a lot of people that just think that you need a nice camera to be able to be a concert photographer, when that isn't the case. It helps having a nice camera, that way you can like do as much as you want to do and do as much as you can and like develop your skills. But the most important thing I think is having a passion for the music and having a passion for live music and having an eye for photography. If you've never really been into photography before this and you just kind of want to start with concert photography, I would start playing around and messing around with just basic photography, both of people and of landscapes and just of like artistic things, and kind of honing your artistic skills before you actually get into shooting shows, because it's kind of overwhelming at first. Like, it's very overwhelming, and the only experience I had with photography before doing this was through my college newspaper, basically, and then like kind of hobby here and there because I had a nice camera. When I started doing concerts, I had the privilege of being with a music blog, but not everybody is going to have that privilege. Not everybody is going to have an outlet to write for. If you want to have that privilege and want to have that leg up, start out with emailing every single music blog in the area, because chances are if you live in a relatively large city, there's going to be at least a few blogs that need contributors. Granted, you're not going to get paid for it, but if you're just starting out, it's like a really good perk to be able to get into shows for free. But if you don't really have that option, or maybe are too young, or don't really have the resources, or are a little bit nervous about it, basically start by going to all ages venues, a lot of DIY venues. Don't give a shit if you bring your camera. So go to those smaller venues and get to know bands, get to know artists, and get to know the promoters for those shows. Because if you can make a really good impression and a really good relationship with people who promote shows, it'll help immensely, because you will have that kind of connection and that networking. Basically, besides the photography aspect of it, the networking is the other most important thing when it comes to having a semi-successful, semi-professional life in concert photography. So now that you've networked and found your way into the right community and with the right people, you need the right equipment. Basically, where's my lens? Here, I'll grab it. I have my camera bag right here, and the first camera I started with was a Canon Rebel XTI, which I think it was like the 5500. I don't remember what the number was, but if you're looking to shoot with Canon, the Rebel series is a really good one to start out with. If you're shooting with Nikon, anything in like the 1000, like D7000, D5000, those are generally cheaper. The smaller the number, usually the more expensive. So like 7,000, and then they have like 700, which is way more expensive, and like the D7, which is like super fancy. My first camera was 10.1 megapixels, and now I'm shooting one with like that's 17, but now they have fucking cameras that are the same price as my 10 that were like 22 megapixels. So you have a leg up on from when I started. Like, you don't even know. Like, iPhones have higher megapixel rates than my first DSLR. So while the camera is super important, the lens is almost more important. The first lens that I started out with was a Canon f1.8 50mm. And I stuck with that one for a couple of years. It was very, very shitty. It was plastic, it was very flimsy, but it was like $90. I couldn't really expect too much out of it, but that's a really great lens to start with. If you want to start with something a little bit heftier, a little bit less fragile, the Canon f1.4 50mm is another great one. This one's about 400 bucks, but it takes beautiful photos. And this is what I shoot with most of the time, at least at smaller shows, when the lighting is very, very low and I don't have a lot to work with. This one is my baby, and it's tiny and it's light, but it takes the most beautiful pictures. The depth of field capabilities are awesome on this. You could get the shallowest depth of field to make the most blurry backgrounds you could possibly want, because everybody loves their fucking blurry backgrounds. Please get the terminology right if you're gonna like get into the concept photography. It's not blurry backgrounds, it's bokeh or low depth of field, okay? Or a low f-stop. End rant. Another great lens that I have invested in is the 24-70 f2.8, and I always say when you're shooting shows, when you don't have a lot of light, at least have 2.8 f-stop capability, because if you have anything higher than that, it's going to be really hard to get anything super crisp without a super high ISO, which that makes graininess everywhere. I just say start with the prime lenses. Don't worry about too much with the zoom lenses at first, because they're way more expensive and way heavier, hence this guy. This one is my 70-200. It's very heavy and very expensive, and I love it, and it's like my pride and joy, but it's real expensive, and when you're starting out, you don't want to spend too much on the fucking lens, because you don't know what you're doing with it yet. Rent it. Find a good place to rent lenses if you want to play around with them before investing in one. That's what I did. The first time I shot Bumbershoot, I rented that lens from Glazer's Camera in Seattle. So if you live in a big city, chances are you can find a good rental place. I know you can rent lenses online, but I feel iffy about doing that because you have to like send it back, and I feel really weird about like mailing something like that. So if you can find some place like that you can rent in person and bring it back in person, that's always helpful. You need to take as many pictures as you possibly can at shows. And I say start with at least an 8GB memory card. I shoot with a 32, but I also do video, so 32 is something that I need. So now you have networked, you have your equipment, you have your memory card, your lenses, you're in there, you're taking a bunch of pictures. Move around. If you have the chance to move around as much as possible. That way you can play with angles, play with different lighting, play with different like focal lengths, and you get a nice variety and you get to hone your skills. If you're like in one spot, say it's a really, really crowded show and you had to get there super early and it's like all ages and you can't really move, that you kind of gotta be stuck in the same place, but still try and like crouch and like play around with different angles. That way you can kind of have a variety and like mess with it. I honestly had the most fun when I didn't have a ton of stuff to work with. When I just had my prime lens, my little 50mm, and I didn't really get to do anything from the camera. I had to do more things with my body. I had to do more things with moving and movement and different angles and just kind of playing around with stuff and getting more creative. And that's why I always tell people to start with smaller lenses that are just prime lenses without any zoom, because you get to hone your skills because you don't have that crutch. And then once you get home, you have all your photos, maybe 1,000 photos, maybe 200, depending on how overzealous you are. I love using Lightroom to edit things to begin with, because a lot of times you will need to do the same editing for each photo. Lightroom makes that so much faster. Photoshop has presets for editing, but I still find it to be a lot slower to like do mass edits. So if you can either invest in Lightroom or like download it on the down low, that's what I did. I'm not saying I bought all my Adobe products, because Adobe products are really expensive. So Invest in an Adobe product either illegally or legally. That is good to do, you know, to have that. You know. So that's basically all the tips I have for like the actual photo part. But honestly, the biggest thing that I've found doing concert photography is just being passionate about the music and being passionate about the people that I'm going to see. My favorite photos are not always the ones that are like the most technically perfect or the highest quality ones. My favorite photos are always the ones of the people that I have like the closest connection with, and then I find like a personal connection with the photo. So finding that connection both through your camera and like on a personal level is, I think, the most important thing, because you could be the most technically perfect photographer in the world, but if your photos aren't like imparting any emotion in you, they're not going to make anybody else feel any sort of emotion. Honestly, most of my favorite pictures from the last year have been of Ravenna Woods, My Goodness, We Are Scientists, a bunch of my friends. And that's not a coincidence. So finding those little niches, finding those friends, and finding those bands that you have this like strong feeling for. So yeah, I think that's enough rambling, but I will post a link to a couple more videos I have on the subject of concert photography in the description, as well as a link to my favorite pictures of 2014, because I narrowed down 50 of them, and a lot of them are of those bands that I talked about. But today's song of the day is I Am a River by the Foo Fighters. It is off their album Sonic Highways. I've been listening to it so much. I've been listening to that record so much in the last few days, it's crazy. And granted, there's only like 8 songs, so I can listen to it over and over and over again. But I Am a River is the song that they recorded in New York, and it's about New York, and it's really emotional, and it was like the end of the whole series, and it was just like feelings and stuff. Also, I did a new blog post all about New Year's on my blog, so you could go to that and read that and stuff, because I'm gonna start blogging more, because I haven't really been doing that much in the last couple of months. But now that I'm here and I'm settled and holidays are over, I'm gonna get back into the swing of life. Let me know if that was like particularly helpful. If you have any more questions, like specific questions, just leave them in the comments below and I will answer them as well as I can. And I will see you guys on Friday? Friday. Yeah, because it's Friday. Okay, bye.